Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and today I'm really excited and looking forward to doing an overview and demonstration of the Reverend Koch Gristle 90. We're going to be putting this guitar on a bench, taking a closer look at it, going through some sound samples, explaining some of these modern electronics that go along with it, as well as giving my final verdict and initial impressions on the guitar when all that is said and done. Now there's a lot I want to go over with this guitar, so there will be timestamps down below in case there's something that you're more interested in others. You can fast forward or rewind, do whatever you choose to find the information that you so desire. But that being said, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to hit a like and definitely subscribe. That helps me out a bit. Now, let's weigh this thing and take a closer look. Now, there were a lot of design decisions made on this guitar that separate it from a traditional Fender Telecaster, but to begin with, the first thing that caught my eye was actually the color itself. It's called Tosa Turquoise. My favorite Fender color of all time is Taos Turquoise, and this is very, very similar to that in the right lighting. But the body is made all of Carina, same as the actual neck itself. It is a set neck. It also has this little raised center block right here, which is a little bit higher than the rest of the guitar itself. We're gonna do some measurements compared to the Fender Custom Shop Telecaster to see how big the difference is in terms of the thickness goes. And also, this guitar is oversized by about 3% compared to a regular Telecaster. But now it's on to the fun stuff. You do get your Bigsby, and one thing that's unique about this Bigsby vibrato system, Reverend used a softer spring than ones that typically come on a Bigsby vibrato unit. I've been playing this guitar a little bit to try and get a feel for it and also to understand these electronics, which we're going to get to in a minute, and I actually greatly prefer this softer spring than the ones that traditionally ship with these instruments. You have a roller bridge, which in my opinion should be standard on any guitar that ships with a Bigsby vibrato, but then the stars of the show are these Koch Fishman P90 pickups. There's a lot of tones that you can get from these. When this button is not engaged and this is not pulled up, just straight up P90 kind of tones to them in all the three positions. When you push in this, it adds a little bit of aggression, a little bit of girth, but it's not super over the top. It's like kind of like a light boost to it. When you're in the middle position here, you have this. This little knob turns this guitar into basically like the out of phase position of a Fender Mustang. That's the best kind of analogy that I can come up with here. It is really, really quacky. It's a little thin sounding, but for certain kind of songs and certain kind of vibes, it's really cool. You can engage this circuit when this is also pulled up to add a little bit more to it for, you know, like a chorus or something like that, if that's what you so desire to do. You have your Cabronita style pickguard right here, and some of the chambering that goes on within this guitar is actually underneath this. Now, one other thing worth pointing out on this guitar, these pickups are active, but you can charge it using this little USB port that is next to the input jack. I still think that's a little weird, but apparently these will last anywhere from 60 to 100 hours on a full charge. And, you know, charging these things once in a while for how great they sound, in my opinion, which we'll get to in a little bit, I don't think it's a big deal. But now we're on to the neck here, which is where the guitar really establishes itself as its own thing compared to a traditional Fender Telecaster, in my view. Some people might say the P90s are very not Telecaster, not Fender, but as recently as a few years ago, Fender had the Noventa series that had those available from the Mexican line. And once you get to the custom shop, there are a plethora of guitars in a Telecaster style body that have P90s on offer to you. The neck scale length is what separates this from all of those. 24 3/4, which is the Gibson scale length, as opposed to 25.5, which is the Fender scale length. And that shorter scale length enables a much slinkier feel to these strings as far as the tension goes, much more reminiscent when I'm actually playing this guitar to a Gibson than a Fender in that sense. Last thing we're going to talk about with the actual neck here is the shape and the actual thickness to it. We're not going to be taking these strings off because I desperately want to get this demo started, but I was able to go to Wildwood Guitars where they measure at the 1st and the 12th fret, which is what normally we would do here. On average here, between 0.8 and 0.84 at the 1st fret, 0.9 and 0.96 at the 12th fret. So really, if you're somebody who plays a Fender Telecaster that's a traditional one, not like a U, one of the 52 reissues or something like that, you're gonna feel right at home with this, and the shape doesn't have too much shoulder to it. It's a very, very comfortable neck. I was quite surprised at how easily I took to it. Now at the headstock, similar to Gibson and Paul Reed Smith amongst other brands, you do have this little triangle cover. You remove it and you have access to the truss rod should you need to make any adjustments to it. And this is the only place it would work on this guitar, because at the base of the neck, it is glued in. There would be no way for you to be able to alter it from there. This nut is called a Bonalite self-lubricating nut. We'll have to see how that works in practice with the actual Bigsby vibrato system. And then you have your Reverend logo, very sleek with the R on top. And finally, at the back of the headstock here, these are locking pinwheel tuners from Reverend. You have your Greg Koch silkscreen signature on it, then the actual serial number, and a real signature on it from somebody who went through it. These guitars are made in South Korea. All right, everybody, my first impressions of this guitar, it's built really well. It feels great. High quality components all across the board here. And it must be said, this thing has a Bigsby, but it still weighs just a hair under 7.5 pounds. That's a huge selling point to me, as I prefer lighter weight instruments. For today's sound demo, we're not gonna be using the Mesa Boogie. We're not gonna be using the Ruby. We're gonna be using the Music Man vintage 1970s tube amp, mic'd up with the SM57. Any dirt that you're gonna be hearing is going to be from the Benson preamp. Maybe if I wanna go a little hairier than that, we'll use the Marshall Drive Master on top. We'll have to see how it goes. So, let's have a listen. All right, everybody, I just finished recording some sound samples for you guys. Let me tell you something. I have not had that much fun filming a demo in quite some time. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed doing one of these this much. I think part of it is absolutely this guitar. This guitar is great. We're gonna get to that, but I have to give some credit here to that Music Man amp. That is just the most killer amp that I've ever had, and every time I plug it in and I play it, I remember why. I have kept that thing for over 25 years. But we're not here to talk about the Music Man amp. We're here to talk about this guitar. This guitar covers almost every single bass, and it does it well. I was a little bit worried about the active electronics because traditionally with my past with the active electronics, never really gotten along with them. Fishman, they nailed this. This sounds amazing. This is quiet with a lot of gain onto it. I can't ask for anything else out of this. The additional functionality that you get when you're pushing in and adding in that little bit of a boost slash grit, and then even that kind of funky town sound when I was pulling it up reminded me of that Fender Mustang. All of it's great. All of it's usable. There's great note definition. It's fantastic. I don't know what to say. As far as the playability of this instrument goes, I didn't adjust anything before I sat down to play this demo. This was the exact way it was sent to me set up from Sweetwater. So with that in mind here, action was a little bit higher than I prefer, but that's something that the next string change that comes around, I'll go to my preferred gauge of string gauge, which is the hybrid slinkies from Ernie Brawl in the orange package, and I'll lower the action a little bit, but no dead spots, no fret outs, no problems whatsoever in any of those capacities. The Bigsby vibrato system, it was going a little bit out of tune, but honestly, I'm going to chalk the majority of that up to me. Not on Sweetwater, not on Reverend, to me, because I did not sit down. I was so excited to get to play this thing. I didn't do my normal recommended stretching of it. I know it looks funny, but I normally really stretch out each string with a system like this to ensure that it's going to come back into tune. And I'm sure when I restring this and I do that, I'm not going to have any problems. Now, one thing I was uncertain about with this guitar before I purchased it was just how much bigger is it? And am I going to notice a difference playing this back to back with my custom shop Telecaster or my Telecaster thin line? When I'm sitting here and holding it, it feels almost identical, but I think the best thing that I can do to give you guys a visual example of how they compare would be to grab the thin line, stand them up side by side, and we'll go from there, and that's what we're going to do right now. So here we have the Gristle 90 side by side with a regular Fender Telecaster, and as you can see, it does have a little bit of a bigger body to it, but it's nothing that's going to make you feel uncomfortable if you are somebody who is used to playing a Telecaster. There are a few things that I would like to measure, mainly two: the width of the guitar. This is 1 3/4 on the Fender, and on the Reverend, it is just over 1.5, like 1.6 inches wide. So it's actually a little bit thinner on the Reverend. I assume that these measurements are going to be close to 11 inches on the Fender. And just over 11, maybe 11 2/10 on the actual Reverend. So if you were somebody who was potentially a little bit scared of having something that was going to be bigger than you were used to, I'm here to report good news. Not that big of a difference. And now it's time for the elephant in the room, and the reason I believe we don't see as many people playing this guitar as we probably should, and that is the price. $18.99 is the street price of one of these guitars, and you don't even get a gig bag. I give PRS a lot of crap for supplying gig bags on guitars that are in this price range. I don't know, man, for an import guitar, and there's nothing against this, okay? I love Japanese guitars. You guys know that, and I like this guitar a lot too, and this is a Korean guitar. I'm not looking down on anything here, but the fact that it ships with absolutely nothing, and when you're going, if you want a matching Reverend case for it, you're adding another $200 onto it, so $2,100 plus tax to have a gig bag that is reliable and trustworthy for an instrument that's this nice. That kind of sucks. There's no other way of saying it. It kind of sucks. However, that being said here, that's my only complaint. That is literally my only complaint with this guitar, is that it ships with nothing but the Allen wrenches and an additional spring for the Bigsby, as well as, the registration and other documentation stuff, because this guitar is an absolute home run. However, before we wrap this up, there is one more thing in regards to the price and really value of what you're getting with a guitar like this that I would like to bring up and mention here. The first being, if you do compare it with one of those PRS guitars that I mentioned, specifically one of the S2s that are very similarly priced, you are not getting anywhere near as good a hardware with those guitars. You are not getting anywhere near as good of electronics. The tones of this guitar, granted they're very different, P90s versus humbuckers, but these Fishmans smoke the SE pickups that come in the S2, so keep that in mind. The second thing I'm gonna say is this, people saying this is a lot for a Korean-made instrument and all of that. If Greg Koch likes these guitars enough to play them on a regular basis and really, really love them, he could play anything he wants. He's Greg Koch. He works for Wildwood. He could grab any Gibson, any Fender, whatever. The fact that he chooses to work with Reverend, and the fact that this was made in conjunction with him to such a high standard that he is happy to play this and it sounds amazing every single time he does, man, to me, that should answer any questions about the quality and the actual product that you're getting at the end of the day here. But we have reached the end of our overview and demonstration of the Reverend Greg Koch Gristle 90. But fret not, we are only on the beginning of our journey with this guitar. So, if you like this video, leave a like. It's free. You can do it. Leave me a comment. Subscribe to the channel. That helps me out too. Lets me know that I'm not wasting my time doing these videos other than for myself. Outside of that, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm plugging this thing back in. I'm going right back to town. Take it easy, everybody.